Hi all. Facing the loss of a loved one at any age or time is very difficult. The hurt just doesn't go away. This chapter I will tell of the memories of my sister and her death. The song I have chosen is called The Prayer and sung by Andrea Bocelli and Celine Dion. Our family went through the worst pain one could imagine, and that is the loss of a child. My sister Sandy was born Sandra Mary Jean on August the 1st, 1959, and passed away at the age of 8. Losing a young child to death is a very painful experience. Anyone who has experienced this kind of loss or death knows exactly this described non-physical pain. She died October the 27th, 1967. The day I was told about her death is as clear to me as if it were yesterday. I was attending the Church Street Public School and would have been in grade 4. I came out of the school at lunchtime heading for home and was alone walking down the front path of the school. It was a fall day, cool but sunny, a sweater afternoon. As I was walking down the walkway, I noticed a familiar car parked at the end. It was my Aunt Pat. She got out of the car and called me. When I saw the car, I sensed something was not right. No one picked you up at school unless it was prearranged, and even then, it was a rare occasion, maybe a doctor's appointment. You were expected to run that mile home for lunch. Pat drove me home. When I went in the front door, I saw that there were chairs arranged around the wall of the front room. I remember seeing my grandma. It was then that my parents appeared from the hallway and led me into their bedroom. I sat at the bed between them both, and Dad spoke to me saying that Sandy had died. This is actually a very painful memory to discuss, and I'm actually holding back tears. And this is only the beginning. I looked up into the mirror of the dresser that was in front of where we sat, and then the tears and pain set in. The reality of her sickness and that she would not be coming home. The little girl I wanted so much to be around and looked after was gone. My best friend, my sister. From those days onward, I had a very difficult time coping. The situation was never discussed in our family about death or about our feelings. I cried endlessly. I would go and find places to be alone so I could cry without anyone seeing me. Even into my teens, I still was searching for some way to deal with the pain I felt inside. Unbeknownst to anyone, I became really troubled in my early teens and did try to take my own life. It was a secret that I kept well. It was at the age of 14 that I met a boy, and between the two of us, we were able to talk to each other about what pained us. This person I married at age 21, but for me, it ended in wanting out of the relationship. We had a daughter. She was 2.5 when my marriage ended, and I was on my own with her. I have very I have many memories of my sister. Some stand out very clearly, and others are prompted by pictures or discussions with family members, or just thinking back. In our childhood, we were always together. I was the big sister looking out for my little sister. Playing time was no difficult than others with dolls, making mud cakes, making a tent with a blanket over the chairs, hours upon hours of just play. School didn't start till grade 1, and most of us were 6 years old before even starting school. In your family, if your family could put up the money, you could go to kindergarten. I remember the day things did not seem right. It was a Sunday because it was at my Aunt Mary's home, and we always visited on a Sunday. Like a ritual, we would usually visit Aunt Mary and Uncle Jimmy and stay for supper. After supper, we would watch TV with Bugs Bunny, then some church hymn songs, into Walt Disney, then Ed Sullivan and Red Skelton Show. It was one of those Sundays, and early in the evening, Sandy expressed herself to Mom about being tired and didn't feel well. Mom said she was sleeping a lot and would take her to the doctors. In those time, in those times, there was no health insurance. The next I remember was that Sandy was in the hospital, always asking when she would be home, never knowing what was happening, only that Sandy was sick and in the hospital. Then when she did come home, it was a great and back to normal and play. Grandma made her a cap to wear on her head that looked like the cap that Grandma wore in Little Red Riding Hood. Sandy had the back of her head shaved where it was operated on. Her condition was unknown to me until it was explained many years later. It was explained like this. Between the brain and the skull, there is a cushion of liquid which has drains. She was born without all these drains, and this created pressure on the brain. She would go into a coma. They had put a temporary drain in place to release the pressure. There were a couple of times when all was well and she would be allowed to come home. I recall going for a few visits, but I was never allowed to go into her room because at the civic hospital, the policy was no children under a certain age was allowed in. Those few times that I was taken for a visit were times they would wheel her out to the waiting room in a wheelchair. It was the last visit that they allowed me to go to her bedside. The nurse bent the rules. Thank you very much. And I was allowed to visit. The nurse took me to this room. The waiting room was facing Carling Avenue, so the room would have been to the back. I passed through a room to a large room with high ceilings and a window. It had 4 beds, but in it, but I don't recall if anyone else was in there. I was told to go see her over on the right side at the back of the room. The bed had the old side railings. She had a tube attached to her. She was not conscious at the time. She was lying there lifeless in one of those big old hospital beds with railings. When I got to her, I looked back and no one was behind me. I was alone with my sister. I stepped up on the bottom rail and reached over the railing and stared at her. I whispered to her, "Sandy, can you hear me?" Her body did not move. Again I whispered, "Sandy, wake up." Then I held her hand and shook it gently, calling her name, again trying to get her attention and wake her up. Her arm was limp. I felt scared and helpless as a sister could, watching her there, not moving, and saddened that she didn't even know I was there. Then I had to turn away because I was being called by the nurse. How come she didn't wake up? This was the last time I saw my sister other than at the funeral. The funeral was almost unbearable. I recall her being in the casket at the front, and the next time they moved her to another location, 2 weeks in the same parlor. When I was with another friend, Kathy, and looked at my sister, Kathy said to me, "Are you not going to kiss her goodbye?" Not knowing what to expect in terms of a funeral, I did kiss her on the cheek. After they closed the casket and the ceremony began, I could not stop crying. Then it became even worse as I cried uncontrollably when they lowered her into her grave. I honestly have a hard time not crying at other funerals. It's like feeling the pain all over again for those that are going through the same, actually feeling their loss and pain as I had felt. Memories are always good to store, and I have some that even after 50 some years, they are safely stored. One memory was when Sandy and I cleaned out the fireplace. I thought we were doing something good at the time. If Santa Claus was going to come down this chimney, it should be cleaned out so he wouldn't get his suit dirty. Right beside the fireplace hung the tools, a small broom and dustpan along with a poker. So when my parents were awake but still in bed, the two of us went to the task of cleaning it. I guess in reality the task was bigger than the two small kids could take on, resulting in a bit of a mess. Sandy was fair-skinned with blue eyes, and her adult front teeth, when they came in, had a gap between them. She had blonde hair that was kept in a blunt cut. We actually both had the blunt haircut with bangs. There was always a pet around when we were growing up. Before the dog, we had an orange-colored cat. This cat was our live doll. Dressing this cat up and putting it in a small doll baby carriage was a task. It was teamwork getting its clothes on and making it stay in the doll baby carriage. Sandy was with us when we got our first dog named Jip. She was lying down in the back seat when we went to get him from an older man on the 8th line. Dad opened the back door so she could see the dog. It was a mixed collie and sheepdog. Our favorite playtime was spent making cakes out of mud. Whenever it rained, it was a treat. Inside, it was playing with dolls and making a house using a blanket over the chairs. In the fall, it would be making a house out of fallen leaves. I recall being in the back seat of a car with a man sitting in the front middle seat. Sandy and I giggled as we watched a daddy long-legged spider crawl up the back of this man. Sandy didn't have a lot of time at school as she was in and out of the hospital. I guess when I think back, her best friend was me. There was less than 14 months difference in our age. Then my sister Barbie came along in September of '63. There would be 4 years between Barbie and Sandy. My brother was born the year Sandy died, so he never knew her. We always had to walk back and forth to school before and after, and also during lunch. Considering the school was a mile away, it was a lot of walking and running. One day coming home stands out very much. The two of us were skipping home and down the road before reaching home, Sandy started to dawdle and takes her time. I asked why she was not hurrying, and after finally pulling it out of her, she said, "Mom told me not to come home." I know my mom has a rough approach on bringing up her kids, and out of the conversation, I would expect she would have said, "Well, if that's the way you want it, then don't come home." Being the big sister, I said, "She didn't mean it." At this point, she is kicking the dust on the road by the fire hydrant in front of the house. She replied, "You don't think so?" Which I replied, "No, she didn't mean it. In fact, she probably wouldn't even remember saying it." Then it was, "Okay, let's go." Such little things we keep in our minds for memories. I also had a similar situation with my mom after this occurrence. I had left the house after confronting her and telling her I was leaving. Following through, I did leave and started walking down the road from the house. What she didn't know is that I wanted her to come after me and make me feel wanted. She never did come, and after walking down the road slowly and knowing she would not be coming, and realizing there was no place to go, I did come back home. This was a lesson I will always remember, and when my son was angry at me and he packed his suitcase and headed down the road, I remembered this situation and went after him. Even when mom was there at that very time and said, "Let him go, he'll come back," I couldn't do it because of my experience. So I went after him and I told him I loved him and asked if he would come back home. He was angry and it did take some convincing, but at least I know in my heart I had made him feel wanted. Now, after all these years, and he is still at home, I question my reaction and think maybe I should have let him go. Funny how things come around and go around. When Sandy was sick and came home from the hospital, there was no shortage of toys. People were so thoughtful and caring. The last memory I have of Sandy is at home and is kept with me. It was the bedroom. It was the bedroom beside the bathroom close to Mom and Dad's room. My twin bed was facing her bed in an L shape. This one morning she woke and told me she didn't feel well, so I ran to tell Mom. Mom called Eileen, a nurse who lived across the road, to come over. She said she needed to go to the hospital. George, her husband, was also the chief of police at the time. He put Mom and Sandy in the back seat and drove them to the hospital in Ottawa. Everyone in town was so supportive of our family troubles. It's still difficult to look back, but because I've actually seen her appear, not once, but many times, it confirms to me that I know we are still connected. I just need her to know that I'm here for her because I have turned her away not knowing it was her. I want to have one more time or moment so that I can acknowledge her and let her know I acknowledged her presence. Up to this point, I have only been able to acknowledge her after she dissipates. This is why I so hope that I will be given another opportunity. I told my best friend after this experience of seeing her on my bed beside me and said, just knowing she is there waiting for me gives me purpose for death. I know we will meet after death, and all that is happening just reinstates for me that there is life after death. There is nothing to fear. At the same time I have acknowledged Sandy's presence, I can't help but wonder what her feelings towards the situation is. I have seen her sitting on my bed, cross-legged with her head down and then turned towards me as I lifted my body up and away from her, uttering the words no. It is only after I fall asleep that she appears to me. In the times I've seen her, I have not reached out to say, "Hi, Sandy, I see you," because she doesn't appear as I look at a living person. She appears as a shadow with an outline. It is her blunt hair, her form of a young girl, her height, and only up close some details of her dark, shadowed eyes that let me know it is her. So when it happens so quickly, I can't be sure it is her. Sometimes I question the way they appear. Why is Sandy a shadow and others a full life detail in color as if an actual person was there? I did say something to an impression that I thought might be her, in hopes that it was her. At my new home on the water, I experienced two more occasions, almost identical in nature, but different nights. A child appeared both times, as if on her knees facing the front headboard. The second time I said, "Is that you, Sandy?" My thought after the first sighting was, if that was Sandy, maybe she was trying to shake the headboard to wake me up. So the second time, which was almost exactly the same situation, I treated it as if it was her. This was in the spring of 2012. It hasn't gone unrecognized by me that I always find my sister trying to wake me up. After writing this chapter, I also noted that as she lay in the hospital bed in a coma, unconscious, that I was the one trying to wake her up. Maybe, just maybe, she knew I was there by her hospital bed, but she was not able to communicate. And that ends chapter 4. Thank you all for tuning in with me. Have a wonderful day. Bye.